After more than a month of demanding answers from HPD on how more than 260,000 cases went uninvestigated, today Eyewitness News sat down with Chief Troy Finner.
Our Liliana Pearson and Kevin Ozebek got to question the chief on the record, but no cameras were allowed. They got answers to many, but not all of their questions on how roughly 1 in 10 HPD cases were pushed aside, blamed on a lack of personnel.
And they join us now with details as well. Kevin, Liliana?
As you mentioned, this was a 2-hour-long conversation. So we certainly got some answers, but there's still a lot that we're wanting to learn. So first, we're going to be starting with an update on how Houston police are managing as they work through all these suspended cases. Right now, we know 261,000 incident reports are falling under that suspended for lack of personnel category. Houston police telling us today the fruits of their nearly 2-month investigation has led to more than 67,000 incident reports being reviewed. That's just around a quarter of the cases. Of the 4,017 sexual assault cases, more than 3,800 have been reviewed, and they've attempted to contact those victims. More than 1,000 doors for last known addresses of victims have been knocked on, and over 200 follow-up interviews have been set, but they haven't told us how many people they've actually been in contact with. An interesting point brought up by the chief today. He says some charges have been filed as a result, but he couldn't give us a number of just how many charges.
And Liliana, 13 investigators have been pushing for these numbers for more than a week now. Ever since last week, we met some victims who say police have not yet contacted them. Now, we've also wanted to know exactly when Chief Finner learned in November of 2021 about this SL, or lack of personnel code, when it existed. Well, today he told us he learned about that code at a command meeting on November 4th of 2021. He says at that meeting, he ordered the code to stop being used and for his officers to reach out to victims whose reports were given that code. Now, the very next night, the Astroworld tragedy happened. The chief said today there are no excuses, but told us his directives were never followed and that he never followed up. I asked Chief Finner today if he made a mistake by not following up, and he said, quote, nobody is perfect, and quote, you are only as good as the information you receive from your team. He said we will know why his orders were not followed when this investigation is done.
And speaking of that support team, we know Finner demoted 2 assistant chiefs because of the investigation into these suspended cases. Kevin Deese and Ernest Garcia, you see him on your screen there. And I've been asking Finner for the better part of 2 months why these were the guys to face the first of the responsibility. But Finner pushed back on that today, saying that they weren't demoted as a disciplinary action and that he loves and respects the men, instead saying it's his job and his prerogative to reorganize his team as he sees fit. They are the first to take the fall. Finner hasn't been able to say, though, if they're going to be the last.
And today we also learned James Jones, the chief policy officer for Chief Finner, is resigning. The chief praised Jones today, who you see here in file video, and called him an honorable great man. Now, we are reporting this because I asked Finner if this resignation has anything to do with the investigation into these cases. Finner confirmed he is a target of the investigation and a witness of this internal investigation, but he says that investigation is still not complete, so the chief doesn't know if James committed any misconduct.
All right, so Kevin and Liliana, of course, the transparency given today is applauded, but when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cases, any word on when this internal affairs investigation could be completed?
Finner saying to us today that this could actually wrap up this month, even as early as just a few weeks, but there's still a lot of work to do. Finner telling us today that he himself has yet to be interviewed as part of this review.
And Eric and Gina, the chief also did say there could be spin-off investigations from this, so we may be very far from turning the page on this. And of course, we are committed to following this every single step of the way.
Glad you guys were part of that discussion today. Thanks for the breakdown, Kevin.